Warning: the following video may contain language and/or mature subject matter that some may find unsuitable for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Our world is in trouble. You can bet that evil people are taking advantage of a system that is stretched surely beyond its means. And yet here we are fighting over theories. There are a number of Delphi groups, and every one of them follows a strange political game. One where the other group is wrong and we're right. One where doxing and cyber harassment are the perfect norm. Why is it like this? Couldn't we all combine our resources and force something to happen? Yes, we could. But would we? There is a real killer on the loose, walking the neighborhoods, totally scot-free. Evil can lurk behind the mask of normality because it often imitates the good features of life. We can't hear the voices in their head telling them to act, urging them to destroy things. We don't understand their modus operandi because we don't think the way they do. With these killers, society tries to reconcile their twisted concepts and wants to answer for the murderer's acts as though something went horribly wrong. Something that could have been prevented had we all just noticed a week earlier or whatever. Understand, it's in the very nature of a murderous person to destroy themselves in the process. There is a real killer on the loose, and he murdered at least 2 girls, probably more. And while our person of interest sits locked up in Howard County on some bogus charges, the real killers, the ones who have facilitated all of this, still sit free. They spend time with their family on Thanksgiving. They put on the mask every day so that the world doesn't notice that they aren't really human. It really all boils down to Delphi. You see, before the homicides and all, these corrupt officials, they had it all. Delphi is a city of tradition. Many of the elected and appointed officials have family history in the establishment of the city itself. So you will see these persons running without competition. Such names as McCain, Blanchard, Randall, Robinson, Fouts, Riley, Ives, Lesenby, Mears, and yes, Patty. The corrupt government in Carroll County has been this way for decades. An easy fix in a dark and unforgiving world. They think that by hiding it like shit in a barrel, the world won't see what's really going on. But shit is shit, and the barrel is now overflowing. So here we are, pigs on the wing. I have to shake my head at everything. How is it that money's more important than human life? I guess we are to believe that the county is okay with this injustice, that these girls died for absolutely no reason, and that the killer is just out there. To understand the crime, we must first understand how the killer thinks. There are 2 types of killer. The first are those who have compulsive urges towards murder. For them, it appears that often they are in the throes of murderous impulses and insane delusions. Often you will hear them describe a certain feeling of detachment from reality, as though the act itself is external to their person and that they are victims to simple thoughts. Like in the case of Paul Michael Stefani, who murdered 3 women and attempted to kill 2 others in the early 1980s in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. He would act out his urges violently and then would seem to come out of it in a haze, remorsefully. He would often report his heinous acts in a high-pitched voice to police dispatch. The newspapers called him the weepy-voiced killer. The second type, and the most dangerous one in my opinion, are the killers that kill because they enjoy, or because killing will give them what they want. Murder for them is about control, power, fate. These individuals often do not show visible psychiatric markers. They can present with sociopathic behaviors, often narcissistic and hypersexual compulsions, as well as egocentrical delusional behavior. These individuals act as chameleons in our society, creating personas and even using jobs and titles to shield their horrible secrets. For instance, Theodore Robert Bundy was known to have killed upwards of 36 women over 4 years throughout 7 states. He worked in the 1970s as a suicide helpline attendant and lived with a woman and child in a seemingly normal family for years. His girlfriend said of him that he was a loving, attentive boyfriend and a beautiful stepfather to her child. Or what about the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, who operated as church president at his local church until he was apprehended? He too had a fairly normal and loving marriage until his arrest, despite his sick and disgusting crimes. These monsters are everywhere and are difficult to identify. Whether the groups believe me or not, I know that Gabe Ellis killed Karina. I also know that he ordered Libby and Abby down the hill.
Why not be quiet? I want you to be quiet.
So I guess the main question here is, why are there 2 sketches? And why did law enforcement change direction in 2019? Because on February 13, 2017, a second individual was spotted right before the murders. According to Indiana State Police press release early on, a vehicle was spotted parked on the east side of the old CPS building in Delphi. Police requested any and all information about the car, though not much else was described publicly by law enforcement. Not a make, nor a model, year, or even color. Though quickly locals identified the vehicle as a 2013 white Dodge Dart and claimed that this vehicle was spotted at one of the entrance lots at the Monon High Bridge Trail. Car identified with the murders. It was at the CPS lot that day. And the fake paper plates that were on the vehicle, they were traced back to Kokomo, to this guy, Tyler Joe French, one of Gabe's best friends. You see, another individual had been identified by a neighbor on the day of the murders, standing down on the south end of the bridge. It seems this guy bears a striking resemblance to French, one that can't be ignored. And Ellis and French were both connected to Derek German. Both were ratted out. And guess what? Police don't have Tyler's DNA. It all boils down to that spring in 2008, when German was nabbed on a chemical theft that set in motion the domino effect that led to the death of his daughter and her friend. And Derek, being caught in a bind, gave up information to throw his partner Dustin Prater under the bus. Both were known criminals, drug dealers, and thieves in the area. In the end, Prater appealed the state's case against him, sued Derek, and inevitably won his freedom. In the state of Indiana, being a paid informant is a way of life for a lot of these criminals. And to corrupt law enforcement, the criminal underworld is an economy, a business, a way of life, until it's over. Between September of 2014 and April of 2015, Derek German was arrested 3 times. His first arrest was with a man named Jamie Cheshire of Kokomo. Charges were for trafficking methamphetamine, and his bond was set at $12,000. During the court process, however, his bond was revoked for not showing to court appearances. A warrant was quickly issued, and he was caught and jailed. This time, he was released on $25,000 bond. This would not last, however, as he was arrested yet again, despite court orders, for possession of methamphetamine. Looking at 25 plus years, German turned state witness and cooperated with the DEA. Shortly thereafter, investigators embarked on several high-risk warrants and raided several counties. Both Gabriel Ellis and Tyler French were of those raided by agents. Thus the motive. Ellis had absolutely nothing to lose. The state of Indiana settled on a plea for German of only 2 years and 264 days in prison. This was a great deal for the charges he had over his head. Soon after, however, Judge Curtis Fouts suspended the sentence, giving German only 1 day time served. This was a very suspect move. Did Curtis know that he was sending Derek to the wolves in the den? I believe that this was the beginning of a hit job, and one that went horribly fucking wrong. The following information is pure conjecture, okay? Though I do trust my sources. These are for the most part locals from the area, and who would understand this crime better than those who live there? The presented narrative that law enforcement there has given us is total BS, clearly, and they know it. The citizens know it, and deep down the groups know it. Some will cling to Carter's words, or Mike and Becky's comments, maybe Kelsey, or to Harvey Carroll's BG coloring books, maybe even Greeno's pivotal impotence in this case. But it's come to a time now where enough is enough. It has recently been confirmed that Abby did have a cell phone. Rumor has it that Becky Patty got it for her, though of course, she denies this. And look, I'm not at all implying that the family had anything to do with the murders of their girls. The only thing that these families are guilty of here is that they trusted law enforcement in their community to serve the memory of their daughters' lives, that justice would be served. And it isn't served right now, because some bureaucratic corrupt cops and lawmen allowed sharks in their pond. And these murderous savages, they feed themselves while they starve the future citizens of their hard-earned cash, future, and trust. They know about the murderers in their community. They provide them with immunity, and have for so long that Old Yeller has begun to bite his own. So let's talk about February 13th, 2017. In the early morning, the 2013 white Dodge Dart is spotted and photographed by Tina Rodell. The photos appear to show a male lining the trunk with garbage bags or removing items, potentially carpeting. The vehicle, I believe, drove west on West 300 North at noon. One of the perps, the younger sketch, was dropped off at the Mary Gerard Nature Preserve parking lot, also called the Mears parking lot. Quickly, he walked up the 501 trail and went down the shallow bridge embankment on the north side. Under the Monon High Bridge, he walked the path below. He could have easily crossed Deer Creek to the southeast side of the bridge by simply walking the creek bank a few hundred meters. He continued on the underside of the bridge until he reached the south side on the private drive. He would arrive by approximately 12:30 p.m., where a neighbor nearby spots him. She got into her vehicle and drove towards him, but he had taken off from the area. It's presumed he stood somewhere nearby and waited at the scene. The bridge guy continued driving north on West 300 North, driving up past the Freedom Bridge, eventually turning into the lot of the old DCS CPS building. He likely grabbed his equipment and walked south towards the Freedom Bridge. He surveyed the area and walked around, loosely scanning the trails and the benches for about 45 minutes. At approximately 1:20, he entered the trails and went to where the trails meet. It appears that he waited around the Mears Trail entrance and that he likely saw the girls arrive at 1:40 p.m. In all likelihood, he stood afar watching for them. You see, it is the opinion of many locals and myself that the killer may have known the victims would be there that day. Early on in the investigation, police implied that the crime was not a chance encounter. I agree. It's my opinion that BG had been catfishing them for days or weeks earlier as a 19-year-old male. There is some evidence that they had been talking to someone, and that they had disclosed this to some friends, that they were meeting him on the 13th. I have to say, now, with confirmation that Abby had a cell phone, it seems even more probable. The girls walked the 501 trail to the Monon High Bridge, and he followed closely behind on the 505 trail. With the leaves off the trees, they were fairly visible to his creepy gaze. By 2:00 p.m., they began to walk out onto the bridge. At this time, he doubled back and entered the 501 and carefully ensured that he was relatively alone. As he quickly walked up the 501 trail, coming to the final guardrail before the bridge, I'm sure that he rounded the trail, checking his blind spots for potential witnesses as he walked up to the first boards of the bridge. The girls would have been more than 70% across at this time. In this moment, he had to act fast. He knew that because he could see them, they could now see him. They likely appeared to him as distant specks, but I can imagine the sense of evil glee he must have felt, knowing that there could be nowhere for them to go. His plan was coming together perfectly. As they came near the south end of the bridge, Perpetrator 2 waited below. He had watched that no one walked up on the bridge until now, and the girls had no idea that a second man waited below and therefore stopped at the bridge trail end. As Libby turned, she realized that a guy was coming. He kept glancing up and back and down at his feet like he had walked this bridge 1,000 times before. Libby began to film him, coming from about 65 feet away. As he got closer, she conceals her phone at her side. Abby speaks up. "Is that guy still coming?" Libby nervously replies, "Mm-hmm." The man orders the girls down the hill. The following is a recording of this man's voice compared with Gabe Ellis, our main person of interest.
Why not be quiet? I want you to be quiet. Why not be quiet? I want you to be quiet.
To those that heard the tape that Libby filmed on that fateful day, you can hear him order them down the hill and the sound of a gun being cocked. They climbed down the bank on the south side of the bridge. It was very, very steep. It's likely that there was a little bit of a tussle as they came down towards the second suspect. They crossed at a shallow section of Deer Creek and onto the property owned by Ron Logan. The four of them walked the tree line near Delphi Cemetery and up towards the Mears land. On the Mears property were several barns. Rumor has it that they were taken to this barn, killed here, that the bodies were concealed next to some hay bales. As we can see, shortly after the murder, some flowers were laid. I believe that after the girls were killed, that Ellis and French went their separate ways at this point. French to go carefully fetch the car, and Ellis to walk back towards the trails. He did this, I believe, to look out for Derek German and wait for him to walk into the woods. When he went back, word was getting around that the girls were missing. With too much heat, Ellis returned to the Freedom Bridge and met French on the way by. That night, Tobe Lesenby acted as captain of the search team. It was a shit show. The crime scene was allowed to be accessed by anyone and his mother, never being secured. Within only 2 hours, Lesenby was trying to call off the search team, citing lighting to be the reason. All of this, in spite of using generator lights.
People were everywhere, including even the very spot where the girls' bodies would be found only 14 hours later. So why was the search called off? How did the killers get the bodies back to the crime scene? And what happened at this barn on Mears' property? Tune in next time when I break down the search and rescue and the staging of the eventual crime scene.